So for people that don't already know you, like, how would you describe your journey so far, or what you're currently doing?
Yeah, so definitely coming from the US, obviously not many people are going to know me. Last year I raced Formula Ford, and that was my first season in the UK. And after that, made the jump up to GB4. Before racing Formula Ford, I did a fair bit of club racing in the US in cars. So I raced what's called SCCA, which I think a lot of people will know, especially if you do iRacing and things like that. You'll probably be familiar with that. And before then, I did karting in 00206. So kind of the general, similar story, similar path as most people do karting, bit of club racing, then move up to higher categories throughout my career.
So with the karting, how old would you say you was when you started it?
I think the first time I ever drove a kart was when I was 6 years old, but then the first time I raced a kart was seven. So in the US, I think I've been out of the karting scene for a little while now, especially in America, but we used to have something called kid karts, which I think is still a thing, but it's like even smaller than cadets. And that was from 5 to 8 years old. That's where you race that. And so that's what I started out in.
Would you say that was like it taught you things that significantly helped, obviously, build your journey through to where you are now at that
I,
stage?
I think the karting definitely makes a big difference. You kind of see the difference in any driver when you're racing cars at the level I am now. You can tell when somebody hasn't driven karts or doesn't have the experience that someone like myself or other people that have been brought up in racing have just as like a natural ability. Like for me, as an example, I've been racing since I was 7 years old. I don't remember anything from before I was like 10. So as far as I'm aware, I've been racing my entire life, right?
Yeah.
And so everything comes very naturally. But you can tell when somebody doesn't have that karting experience or that general racing experience. So it definitely makes a huge difference, yeah.
Was it always something that like you wanted to take seriously, or was it more? Did it start off like just for enjoyment, and then you really enjoyed it and thought this is what I want to do, or was it just more of a it's something you always knew that was it?
I think it was something that kind of just I happened to be good at. I got into a kart the first time that I did. It was I had an interest in racing, and cars specifically and all that. And my dad recognized that, and he wanted to, spend time with me, father son experiences. And so we ended up doing karting because we were relatively close to a track, and I it just came naturally to me, and I was winning races, winning championships at a very young age. And from there, we've kind of just gone with the flow. Like, yeah, I'm good, so we'll keep going, right? You can make a career out of this if you're a quick driver and a good personality and all that. And so we've done a lot of working up to it. It's a lot of hard work, but it's always been something that's kind of, that's been the expectation is my life has always been involved in racing and it always will be.
Yeah. With the like karting tracks, were they all outdoor with some indoor, or was it like a mix?
I would always race outdoor tracks. We had a little bit of stuff like K1 and all that. That was usually in the winter time when we weren't able to race because I was up in the Midwest and we had snow. And it's difficult to race on a snowy track. So I would do like winter series in K1 very early on, like when I was 8, 9, 10, around that age. But after that, it was just outdoor karting from then on. And we would do quite a lot. There were some seasons I did like 40 races in a season, so it was just nonstop. Every weekend we were racing.
Was it something that was quite easy in terms of the traveling and stuff like that, or were you having to travel like quite far for each race?
Yeah, that's the difficulty with the States, isn't it? It's so big. Nice part about being in England is I'm within 3 hours of 10 different racetracks and all that. But in the US, the closest track, which I called my home track, was still an hour and 30 minutes away.
Yeah.
So every weekend I would be going over hour 30-minute drive there and back and stuff like that. And those weren't even like the popular tracks. I had weekends where I would race on Sunday, and then 12-hour drive back home to get to school on Monday. It was a bit miserable, but we made it work.
How did you find the school and karting balance? Was that something that was more like your family might have been more like, okay, this you're quite good at karting, you know, the school, or was it something that you thought you balanced quite well, or?
We definitely had to set boundaries, right? Like with any sports, you know, you can't put too much focus onto it and sacrifice your academics, right? My I think at least on my mom's side, she was a first generation college student, and we wanted to continue that in the family, and you know, just develop our academics and things like that. So it was always a very big priority to make sure that alongside racing, I was keeping my grades up and things like that. I know in the UK, it's kind of difficult to call out of school and such. In the US, I missed a lot of school.
Yeah.
A lot of school. I think later in high school, I think I missed like a whole month of school for racing. And I still, you know, passed with high marks and all that, but it was definitely hard to balance, but it taught you a lot of skills in terms of time management and,
Yeah.
you know, working around the clock.
Because, like, with school here, I know sports in America seems like within schools and their understanding seems a lot bigger than it is here. I don't know, obviously, if it's the same if you're doing, because I'm assuming there's nothing to do with motorsport in school. It's like your footballs and, so were they still very understanding about, obviously, you being big on sport, but just not within the school system, almost?
So one thing I noticed is like people in the US don't really take racing that seriously. Obviously, you look at it now and people are well aware of Formula One and things like that, but back like 10 years ago, it was people thought NASCAR was it, and then they didn't even know what go-karting was. So a lot of the times, because they thought, when they heard go-karts, they thought like the indoor electric carts and things like that. They weren't very happy, so we ended up just lying to our school and saying I called out sick all the time. So I had like 26 sick days, and they're like, "Are you all right, man? Like, do you need to see a doctor?" I'm like, "No, I just got sinus infection or something like that." It was funny, but yeah, no, we just kind of had to work our way around that. And there were some teachers that were okay with it, and others that like gave me some looks or were just very unhappy that I was calling out for sports and stuff.
Was it something like within your school, like whether it was your mates or just everyone in the school, was like motorsport quite a? Because obviously, if there's someone that's very good at football in school, they're probably like everyone's well aware of it and all like positive about it. But like with motorsport, you don't. I mean, in England schools, it's not really. You don't think about someone being in school being very good at motorsport. Is it the same in America, or is it something that's quite well known?
Yeah, I think it's weird to say, but it was always kind of like an insecurity, if I may. It's like I never told people I was a race car driver. For the last 2 years of me being in school, I was racing cars full time. I never told anybody. There were probably like 10 people, 10, 15 people. All of them were my friends that knew that I raced cars. And I didn't like telling people. It was uh, hard to answer the questions that they had, and I think a lot of people just misunderstood what it was exactly. So it was cool, but yeah, not many people knew about that. I let the attention go to all the football players, baseball players, all that, and I was fine with it. But yeah.
So when you finished karting and took the next step, how old do you think you was around then when that happened?
First time I drove a race car was when I was 13, so that was pretty young. And after that, I think it was I drove a race car once, and then like 2 years later, I did my first race, which was when I was 15. That was in Formula Ford in the U.S., and that was a lot of fun. But yeah, so it was very young age. I think they actually changed the rules of most of the sporting regulations in the U.S. now that you can't do what I did. So you can't have a competition license at 14, which I did. You can't drive a race car at 13 like I did. So it's like obviously rules have changed, but yeah, that's when I started at least.
And then, like with the Formula Fords, was that something that you did for like a few seasons, or was it more of just a very quick stepping stone to get higher
It,
up?
it was a very quick stepping stone. We kind of, because I was a first generation driver, we had no idea what to do. We did the karting stuff. It worked out well. We happened to be quick in that. And then we got up to cars, and that's just a completely different deal, right? We knew how to put a kart together. You know, it's got a solid axle, all that easy stuff. But when you get to cars, it's a completely different world. You have to meet tons of new people and just figure out where to go because there's so many more options. So we did the Formula Ford out of recommendation from one of our friends, and after that, I did a season in a car called Formula Enterprise, which is sort of like it's somewhere between like an F4 and F3 car. So it's a pretty quick race car, and that was just my first season because we didn't know what to do next. I think looking back on it, that was a pretty big step to make, just running from one single Formula Ford race to this 185 horsepower, 600 kilo race car. Who's, you know, not a small jump at all, but it taught me a lot of things and it's brought me to some good places. But yeah.
One thing with that is, so going from obviously karting to a Formula Ford, I assume one of the like big differences is it's a lot more physically demanding, I'd assume. So with obviously it getting more serious and going into Formula Fords, when would you say like you started like having to be quite serious with, you know, like fitness and like the gym, that type of thing?
Yeah, it was definitely like there was a moment. So I used to be like pretty heavy. I was pretty, you know, heavy set, and I was going to be running USF Juniors, which is in the US, that's part of the Road to Indy ladder. And when that happened, I got into that seat. They told me, they're like, you gotta lose weight. I would have been, I think, about 90 kilos, 95 kilos, somewhere around there. And they told me, like, you won't be able to drive this car. You won't be able to, like, you're too heavy to be driving this car right now. We need to be closer to a weight limit. So I remember that season, that off season, I just worked as hard as I could to get myself fit, get myself down to the right weight, and that's when it started. And I've kind of maintained that physical ability and that kind of discipline. But it has definitely changed. Like karting is a completely different physical aspect as well. I've gotten back into a kart a couple of times now, and I'll say I'm out of shape for karting. I can drive a GB4 car completely fine, but I hop into a kart and I can only do 10 laps.
Yeah, it's like I mean, my brother does like local like team sports. I don't know if you've seen them here. And it's like he asked me to go on one time, and he does it all the time. I don't, and it was like 30 minutes, and I was dead afterwards. I couldn't do anything, whereas he's perfectly fine.
Yeah. So it's just weird, but it all comes down to how often you drive the car. Because I think no matter what you do when it comes to the physical strength of driving a race car, you can't really train it 100% off track. You just have to drive the thing, and that's what's been the most progressive in terms of my physical training. Has just been getting in the car and driving it, and that has the best effects.
Would you say that that first like moment where you got told you need to train and get to set weight to go into Formula 4, would you say that was the hardest part of your like in terms of fitness so far? Because after that you was able to maintain, or would you say it's harder like maintaining that then, if you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I think it was surprisingly easy to get myself down to the weight that I needed to. I think I was just able to, having that set goal and having to be able to focus on that was very easy to me. Just because, you know, you have a finish line, right? Maintaining is difficult because you have to continuously build strength and build stamina and work out so much, and just at the end of the day you're so hungry, but you have to allot a certain amount of calories and things like that, because at the end of the day you have to show up to the track. I show up to the track at 70 kilos, and that's it. But I still have to be as strong as possible at 70 kilos. So it's difficult to maintain. It's difficult to do all of it, but yeah.
So would you say probably mental strength is definitely just as important as your physical strength in your journey so far?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's all about discipline, and there's many different types of discipline, whether it's, you know, emotional, ethic, things like that. And obviously some people are naturally better with discipline in regards to physical strength. Some are better with time management and all that. But you kind of just have to combine all of those into the season and make sure that you're on the right track.
So with your seasons in Formula Ford, would you say they was very like successful?
Yeah. Um, I did three race weekends ever in Formula Ford in the U.S. And then went over to race Formula Ford in the UK, and that was a great season. I think near the end of it, it got a little bit tough. There was just things, the natural shakeup of the competition and all that. It's just how it goes, especially in Formula Ford, where a lot of people come out for the Walter Hayes Trophy and the Formula Ford Festival. That kind of changed my perspective on it, but it was a great season overall. I think I got second in the championship. I won a couple of races, so it was great preparation for racing GB4 this year.
I heard you mention that obviously moving from the US to the UK. How hard would you say that was?
I think it depends on the person. I'm one of those people that I don't mind, being alone a little bit more and just, dealing with myself and dealing with my own personal issues, whatever they may be. And so moving to the UK was obviously challenging because, didn't have any friends, didn't know a single person besides the people on my team, and kind of restarting from zero was a bit difficult at times, but I've enjoyed it. I enjoy experiencing the new culture and experiencing the new racing styles and all these new tracks, the history behind it all. At the end of the day, the reason I moved to the UK is for racing, and so that's really all I think about.
Would you say there's definitely a like culture difference in terms of people's like attitude towards racing from America and the UK?
Absolutely, yeah. I think the professionalism in the UK is incredible. It's great to see, especially at a level even, I don't want to say as low as GB4, but when you compare to like Formula One, obviously, yeah, it's going to be lower. The professionalism in the paddock on all levels of motorsport in the UK is really special to see. I like it because people take it seriously, and you can see the dedication in the work of not just the teams, but the marshals, the people on like working with the series and the championships and all that. There's just so much love for the sport here, and that I appreciate a lot.
And then after Formula Ford, what would you say the next step was, and around how old was you at that point?
So I'm trying to remember. So I went to do USF Juniors. That didn't work out. That was basically an F4 car. And we ended up putting a lot of effort and a lot of time and a lot of our money into that. And when it didn't work out, I kind of had to take a break from racing. It wasn't a complete break. I still raced, a full season of cars, but it was different. So I raced Miatas, and then I raced a club race car called a Spec Racer Ford. And so that was like the two seasons. That was 2022 and 2023, and then I did the season of Formula Ford last year.
And what was those cars like compared to Formula Fords? Would you say it's like another quite a big step up, or are they all smaller, like gradual steps?
I don't think any of them were like a step up necessarily, more of a step sideways. Just completely different disciplines, right? The Miatas, the MX-5s, they're a completely different car. They're full body, they're very, very heavy, very different tire, very different engine, different gearbox, all that. So it was kind of fun to jump from car to car and learn the different quirks and different aspects of each car. I enjoyed that part of my career as just learning a bunch of different cars. I think that season I drove 7 different race cars, and it was awesome. I just got to play around with things, jump into cars, do what I wanted to. And so it was cool. But yeah, it was definitely, when I moved to Formula Ford in the UK, I think just racing in the UK in general is just higher quality. But that was where it kind of was a step up, because not necessarily the car, but the level of competition. definitely.
Is there anyone that you could say was like a standout person when it came to helping you, like in the UK and getting to where you are now? Obviously, a lot of it would be, down to each individual like yourself putting the work in. But do you think there's someone that would like you could almost go to?
Yeah, I met him just after my first race in the UK. It was Gary Ward, who's actually now my manager and team owner of the GB4 team that I race for. And that was a big moment where I met this guy who basically had a lot of experience in racing. He was team principal for multiple GB3 and British F4 teams at some points. Raced himself. He raced in F3 back when it was F3000, and just in general had a lot of experience. And when I met him, I wasn't originally planning on doing anything besides trying out his simulator because he had a simulator at his shop. But the more I got talking to him, the more I realized, like, well, I'm this new kid. I don't know anybody here. I need to get a head start on what I'm going to do because no matter how much networking you do, you can't just show up, and meet infinite amount of people, get the 10 years of experience in racing I had in the US. I can't get that in 1 year. So I do need some help. And when I met Gary, we had a conversation and we figured out a deal that worked for us. From there, he became my manager, helped me through the entire season pretty much last year, and then we set up a GB4 team. So that's been a big, big step because without meeting him, I don't think I'd be racing GB4 this year at all, and maybe not racing at all.
So the GB4 team, was that a new thing that was set up between him, yourself, and obviously others? Was that like, how did that go?
It basically came down to the end of the season. We were trying to figure out what to do next, and we thought that GB4 was going to be the right call. I wanted to stay racing in the UK, and it just made sense. So when we went and started talking about, okay, well, let's look at the grid, see who's winning, who's doing this, who's doing that, and one day we were talking, and he's like, Jason, I think I can do better. I have this idea, and I'll throw it out there. You can talk to your dad about it and talk to everyone involved. If you like the idea, we can do it. I think I can set up a GB4 team. I know where it cars, I know this and that, and I knew he had the experience and the capacity to run the team, and so we ended up doing that, yeah.
What would you say your reaction was at that moment when you got either that call or?
I think it was, I, I think I felt like comfortable. It was one of those, I've had a couple of moments in my career where I make a decision on whether it's like working with a team or driving a car or this and that, and it doesn't feel right. There's this feeling that you get, and it's just, you just sit there and you go, I don't think I could have made any other decision, but it doesn't feel like the right one. But this wasn't one of those moments. It was one of those where I sat there and I'm like, this is the right thing to do. This is the right, like, something good is about to happen, basically. So I was happy with that.
And then you said earlier how you looked at, like the teams and drivers and the competition in GB4. Would you say that's something you're quite good at, looking at drivers, looking at their strengths, their weaknesses, and being able to take that into the race weekends and try benefit as much as possible from that?
Yeah, I think like everything is calculated. So you kind of, especially when you're working with a bunch of the same drivers from the entire season, you get to learn, if anything, like the way they set up their car, from like the brake bias to their driving style, their racing style, what types of corners they're fast and slow in. And so you can definitely set up different kinds of passes for different kinds of drivers, knowing their attitudes on and off the track. So there's so many different aspects that go into making a pass happen or just making racing happen that are very like emotionally based, but you do that decision making off the track in a way.
And then going back to how you talked about balancing the school, like balance and education, would you say that obviously having to analyse lots of data, it can be quite like intense, I assume, and for some people it might be harder than others. Would you say education in terms of that is quite a big thing, or is it something you're more like if you know the basics and you're passionate about motorsport and winning, it's quite easy to pick up, or would you say it's definitely complex?
It's definitely more complicated than I know, right? I've got engineers. I've got two engineers that they pull all my data. I just look at it. It all depends on who you have on your team and who you have experience with in the past. The way I learned how to pull data, read data, I learned how to coach from like one single guy who was just very good at what he did. He's working with IndyCar now and all that. And it was just, you kind of just pick it up when you watch it happen. It depends on the learning curve of who you are as a driver, as a person. But that being said, the people that go to school know their stuff. So I've got two engineers. One of them is sort of fresh out of college, and he is good. Like he just knows everything. So it's awesome to watch. So I think like education has a ton of value when it comes to motorsports right now.
And then so getting the call or meeting about setting up a GB4 team, from that first moment of being told as an idea to obviously it being implemented, how long would you say that like process was, and how old?
It was, we were forced to make a quick decision when that happened. I think it was like 2 days. I think from the beginning of that conversation to the end of it. It was just, I mean, I think it was like November when we made that decision, and things had to kick off because we have to build the infrastructure from scratch if you want to start a GB4 team. And you need time to do that. You need time for entry. You need time to make deposits and buy trucks, buy tires, this and that. So there's so much that goes into running a racing team that you have to be prepared well in advance. So when we came up with the idea, we had a very short amount of time to get things done, and so we needed to make that decision quickly.
Was there anyone else you brought with you, like in previous teams or like engineers or anything that you brought with you to GB4, or was it a complete like fresh start?
It was sort of a complete fresh start. Everyone that's working with us in GB4 worked with Gary, so I didn't really bring anyone on board this year. Um, but there's definitely moments in the past where I've wanted to bring some old team members on board, but they're all in the States now, so I can't fly them over.
Yeah, and then I think was the first GB4 race in, was it April at Donington?
Yeah, late April, I think it was, yeah.
Yeah, so I think I did that. The first race I've ever been to watch that was like an outdoor proper race. I was there, and I thought I was quite surprised on how fast like the GB4 cars looked. Like I went there not knowing what GB4 cars was, or most of the cars that were racing was, and then I came back and I was quite shocked. How would you say the step up in driving a GB4 car was compared to previous?
It's a big difference. Mainly, the biggest thing that it's taken me to get used to, I think, so far has been the tires. I have very limited experience on like Pirelli rubber. This is the first time I've driven Pirelli rubber, and it's a complete difference from anything that we have in the U.S. and anything I drove last year in Formula Ford, because we use radial tires in Formula Ford. So that's been the biggest thing. But yeah, those cars are incredible. They were the GB3 cars from last year. They've been tuned down a little bit, and then new wings, but that's it. They're basically exactly the same otherwise, and they're insanely fast. They're incredible cars to drive.
What are your thoughts on Donington as a track itself?
This might ruffle some feathers a bit. I know so many people love it, but it's one of those tracks that I can't really catch right. I can't get a lap together around there. I love the track, but at the same time, I think I just don't like it because I'm not that good at it.
What I find crazy is I remember like researching a bit about Donington, because that's probably, I live quite like up north in England. It's probably the closest track if I want to go watch racing. It's the closest track. I think it's an hour and a half.
Mhm.
So like with that, I can't believe they like used to race F1 cars around it originally. It's like I just can't believe that happened.
Yeah, I mean that track is insane in a GB4 car, it's insane in a GB3 car, and it's insane in a British GT car in all their own respective ways. It's
Yeah.
ridiculous.
What was the next race after
That
Donington?
was Silverstone.
And
Yeah.
coming out of Donington, did you think you had a positive weekend? Did it go well? Was it a shock or?
It was a pretty bad weekend. It was one of those where it kind of woke me up a little bit, seeing the level of competition and the difference. You know, I think I had lower expectations than I should have when I showed up that weekend. And when it didn't work out for me, I definitely needed to make a hard reset. So woke myself up in like I think it was like 2 weeks between the first two races, and just kind of had to wake up and get back into the swing of things. So Silverstone was a little bit better, but yeah.
How much testing did you have before going into like Donington? Was everything ready like as it should have been, or was it quite late? Obviously, because it was a later decision in November.
Yeah, it was a little bit late, and we made the decision to do testing later in the winter because we didn't expect the weather to be so nice in the early season. So we only had 3 days of testing before the first race at Donington, which didn't feel like a ton, and it definitely wasn't as much as everyone else. And I think that definitely had a big effect on that first race because showing up and having other drivers with like 15 to 20 test days under their belts and I had three, it was a bit challenging, but it was probably about what you would expect for that level of experience, I would suppose.
Where would you say the car was? Are all the cars very similar there, or are they like different, completely different? Is like what's the competition like in terms of teams and cars?
I think each team has their own specialty, definitely. I guess it comes down to in a series like this, it'll have to come down to the driver because Tatis does a great job at making those cars pretty similar. The Montoon engines this year are great, so they're pretty similar. I mean, the MSV is doing a great job of making sure that the cars are very equal. So if any team has an advantage, you put that up to the drivers, their ability to set the car up and give feedback.
So after Donington, before the next race, what was it like? Did you feel like you had to almost put double the amount of work in, or was it just one of them where it was just like, right, that's how it is, it's fine, I understand now?
Yeah, I think it was a little bit of both. I definitely I had to take a day or two to find my head again, and then once that happened, got right back into the gym, brushed it off, and just focused on Silverstone and getting back there, because that was the biggest thing for me. It was just, you have to not beat yourself too much up over it, and, take the time and just get into the next weekend with a clear head.
So what's the structure in terms of with GB4, like a race weekend, especially like at Silverstone and all these other tracks? If you've never raced there previously, I can imagine that it might be quite hard to adapt to.
Yeah, I think Silverstone, all these tracks besides Snetterton, I've never driven on the full layouts. So Donington I've driven, but on a different layout. Same with Silverstone, same with Brands Hatch. So I've got some experience on some parts of the tracks, but not a lot. Beforehand, I'll do some simulator work and just get some experience under my belt in terms of learning the track, learning where the corners are. After that, it comes down to trying to get there for a test day, whether that's in the GB4 car or in something else, just to see the track in person, be able to learn it, and get into the race weekend, save an entire day of testing, without having to learn where each corner is, because that's valuable track time that you can't be losing out on.
With the like simulator, you hear some people that just don't like simulator work at all. You hear some people that can't get out of it. How much would you say benefits you from, for example, Silverstone, going from the simulator to actually driving around? How much crosses over and how much is like an unknown?
I'm personally not one that's really into simulators. I think the value of a simulator depends on how much money you put into one. I have to pay rent, so I don't have much money to put into a simulator. And so what I have is laying next to me is a Logitech G20 or G920, and it slaps on my desk, and I just learned where the corners go. That's the only transferable aspect. You could watch like onboards and videos and stuff like that, but that's never. I've never been able to memorize a track from just watching an onboard. I always have to drive it, so the simulator is great for at least understanding where the track goes.
And then in terms of, I'm assuming, is it similar to other motorsports races, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, in terms of practice, qualifying? Because I think, is there more than one race? Is there a
Yeah,
few
so
races?
we actually get testing on Thursday, Friday, and then qualifying Saturday, and then racing Saturday, Sunday. So we get 3 races for the weekend, one on Saturday and two on Sunday.
And would you say that, obviously, say for example in race one, do you learn quite a lot about like the drivers, how people drive, and the what where you are that weekend in terms of as a team to take over to like race two, race three, or would you say it's quite a quick turnaround and it's all just kind of putting everything as you can and just seeing where things go almost?
Yeah, I think you just have to make the most of each situation that you're in. For example, race 3 on the weekend is a reverse grid from the top 12. So, that makes a huge change if you're in the top 12. There's a lot going on there. And just in general, the starting order is going to be different. The track temperature is going to be different. You can make setup changes in between races and things like that. And obviously, just having a fresh night of sleep under your belt is a good way to get things done as well. So there's a lot that goes into each race, and you kind of do have a decent idea of where you stack up, but you can absolutely make changes to your racing.
And then how would you say that overall weekend went, or individual races? Would you say there was a standout moment in any of them, or
The first 2 races were all right, definitely better than how Donington ended. I was sort of getting used to the dirty air of those cars, especially on Silverstone, where it's just such a downforce dependent track, especially Sector 1 for us. Getting used to that and getting used to the racing style was quite a big difference. We ended up improving each race, and I ended up getting second in the third race. Almost won it, should have won it, but I made a mistake, and we'll leave it at that.
would you say that competitions like the same in most tracks, or like you might be fighting with a specific team, or every race can it be completely different?
It's kind of hard to say because everyone is improving, especially with this new car. There's so much that nobody really knows about right now. And so yeah, each weekend is kind of different. You're fighting against different people the whole time, so that makes things interesting. But since we have so much time in testing and such, you do end up around the same cars, pretty much. At least in the testing sessions, you end up racing pretty much everybody at some point in the weekend, and so you have a good understanding of how at least everyone drives.
Yeah, I'm gonna say, would you say that's like better than how sometimes you might just be fighting the same two drivers, same team every single time? Would you say being able to fight so many different people, so many different driving styles helps develop you as a racing driver?
Yeah, it's definitely, it keeps you on your toes. It keeps you being creative, keeps you trying to work hard to understand each different aspect of someone else's driving and racing style. So it's definitely a great way to learn at a very accelerated level.
Is it quite hard to? Would you say you have any like you're friends with everyone, or because it's balancing obviously them being rivals, and if you get along with people, some people find it easier, some people find it hard. Would you say you have like any good friends in the GB4 Championship, or would you say a lot of it is just a rivalry?
I think without teammates, it's a little bit harder to have, solid friends necessarily, but there's definitely people I'm acquainted with, you try to keep a smile on your face with everybody, and from there it's just being friends, being friendly, having a chat when you pass by, that kind of stuff. It's just not making enemies is the main thing.
Do you ever try, like ask people about what they are thinking about the race weekend, or maybe things they might be doing if it's something with that they want to change with, like a setup, or is it things that people, like keep to themselves, obviously?
I think it definitely varies on who you're talking to about that, but every now and then we'll share information. Each of us have our own ideas. I think mainly when you share something with somebody, there you don't really expect them to be around you. You don't expect them to be your competition. I think that's the only reasonable situation where you would say that to somebody. Definitely, I wouldn't go as far as setup, because at least in my eyes, I've got the rules where the team does the setup, the team owns the setup, so that's their information to share. Anything driving related is on me. I am at the liberty to share it, but I probably won't. But I think a lot of people have that same mindset.
What would you say is so far, obviously through Donington and Silverstone, was there ever like a standout moment that possibly either changed how you thought or whether good or bad? So far, do you think there's like one moment that could have either knocked confidence or significantly improved it?
I think my podium at Silverstone was very good. It was one of those times where it had been such a long time since I had even fought for a win that I kind of forgot what it felt like. And so to relive that and to relive that experience and to drive hard and race for something that actually felt like it mattered, racing for 10th and 12th or 11th, you just feel like you're wasting your time out there, right? So when you're finally fighting for a win, you kind of, that passion is reignited and that effort, you just magically find a couple more tenths because you just want it that much more.
And then after Silverstone, what was the next track?
Oldham Park was the next one.
Would you say that was better than Donington? Similar?
It's kind of hard. That was such a weird weekend. The weather was very strange. It was just all over the place, and we got unlucky or made the wrong decisions with tires, because it was just mixed conditions the whole time. And it's easy to chalk it up to a faulty weekend, if you want to say that, but at the same time you kind of have to look back on it and go, yeah, we did what we could. There were some mistakes that I made, there were some mistakes that the team made, but at the end of the day, you can't put too much pressure on a weekend like that the way it was.
How hard, like, what's the difference between driving obviously in the dry or like wet and mixed conditions? How hard actually is that difference?
Well, it's tough. It was tough, especially for me, because I was probably the only person on the track who had never raced or driven that car in the wet at that point. There were a couple of official series tests that I didn't do that were wet, and the majority of the pack, or the majority of the drivers in the field, had driven during that test and had experience in the wet. So it was a big learning adjustment for me. At the end of the day, it's exactly what you'd think. I mean, we were driving. I drove in full wet conditions on slick tires, and I drove in full dry conditions on wet tires. So it was slippery in both situations, but slippery in very different situations. I definitely recommend watching those races, especially race 3, because it was crazy.
Do you think these are all things that help you obviously grow as a driver? For example, obviously it's probably not ideal if you're on slicks in wet, but do you think things like that which almost help you in ways? Yes, in a realistic situation you don't want to be on those tyres racing, but obviously the way the car handles in those situations, you think it would like helps you grow?
Yeah, I mean, it's all about adaptability, right? So just making sure that as a driver, you're capable of adapting to certain conditions and situations, um, learning about different driving techniques, again, being creative with your passing and things like that. It all comes down to, it's just experience. And then obviously when it comes to the tires, it's that quick decision making, learning how to make the right decision and how to assess why you might have made the wrong decision.
Do you think it's quite easy for you to like get through like minor setbacks, or is it something that quite hard to start off with and then obviously you can forget about it and move on, or are you very easy to bounce back straight away?
I think it's not too much of a problem for me as long as they don't happen continuously. I think this goes for most people. The more mistakes you make consecutively, the more it kind of builds up on you. I've never had too much of an issue with small mistakes and things like that. But once they start to compound, you get a little bit frustrated. Having like this break, we're just about to finish our summer break, and that's been nice to kind of settle down and look at things in a different perspective and get some testing in besides that. But kind of just wash the mistakes away is the way I like to look at it.
So was Silverstone the last race before the summer break, or has there been more after Silverstone?
It was Alton that was the last race before the
Oh, yeah.
break. Yeah.
And then coming out of Alton Park, going into the summer break, would you say that was something you felt like you needed, or would you say it was like you was kind of missing the racing? How would you say that was?
It was definitely a little bit needed. Leaving Alton, it was just not a great weekend for us, and just kind of needed a week to go dark for a little bit, and that was very helpful. We ended up getting some testing in during the summer break, which was nice, and that, without the pressure of having a race weekend looming over your head, both of those, all those tests were, they were much better performances than what I had had in the past. So I'm looking forward to what I'll be able to do after the summer break, and I think it was valuable for me, definitely.
So in terms of more off the track things, what stuff do you like to do? Like obviously in summer breaks.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those. I'm still exploring the country, right? I've only been living here for not even 2 years, so learning as much as I can. I've had some family over and some friends over the past few weeks, and having them around, being able to show them the places that I've been. Some of them have never been to England or never been to Europe. Got the chance to go to France, and then it's just staying on top of my fitness and things like that, because even though we're on the break, it's not like we can really, say I'm on too much of a break. You can't let go of what makes you a good driver, and so keeping that mindset in check and things like that, it's always important.
What are some of the favourite places you've been to so far, in the UK, like cities or?
I really like Oxford. It's cool. It's just nice to see the buildings and stuff like that. There's a lot of people, a lot of students my age and things like that. So it's you kind of feel a little bit more at home in a way. Cambridge, another college town. Cambridge is beautiful. Been there as well. Um, it's kind of hard to say. I think I can't say I've got a favorite because I don't want to insult anybody. But I did go to France the other week, and that was nice as well. But that's not in the UK, obviously. So
Would you say that being in the UK and like you mentioned, obviously you've had family and friends over in this summer break. Would you say that's something you definitely miss, not having them people there like family and friends all the time, or would you say it's something you'd say you've dealt with quite easily, maybe not easily, but well?
yeah, I mean, there's always ways to get around that kind of stuff. Phone calls do the trick for me. I know that's different for some people, but having the chance to hang out with them, for the first time in 6 months or a year for some of these people, it's nice. But yeah, no, I mean, it's you're able to kind of adapt at least, and find new friends in the UK. It's not like you're replacing the old friends, but it's just keeping yourself busy.
And going back to family, how important do you think your parents have been so far in your journey to where you are now?
I mean, they've been the driving force. I think it was actually my mom and dad who convinced me to come to England in the first place. I was kind of unsure about it, and they were just like, dude, you're never going to have this opportunity again. Like, you have to do this. And so that's been always nice. And throughout my career since I was 6 years old, they've been nothing but supportive of me, and I can't thank them enough. I'll never be able to repay them for what they've been able to do for me, and obviously I'm very thankful for that. So yeah, it's an incredibly important role that they have in my racing.
Have they ever come to watch like any GB4 races, or been able, or do they watch it, for example, like online or?
Oh, they absolutely watch every race on YouTube. They haven't been able to see a race. They'll be coming to Silverstone later in the season to watch a race, and my mom came and watched a test day, and that was the first time she's seen me drive a car like that, and I was kind of excited for her to see it. Uh, and my aunt as well came, and that's the first time she's seen me drive anything, so that was cool as well.
Is there a sense of like when she saw you drive a GB4 car for the first time, almost like fear in a way, like a slight bit of for you? Because they are fast, and it is obviously a risky sport. Is there anything like that which obviously can sometimes crop up? No.
No. I mean, like, you kind of have to abandon that kind of stuff. You'll never get anywhere in racing if you care about the people watching in that way. Yeah, so obviously, yeah, you want to make sure your mom is comfortable. And I've had some pretty nasty accidents and all that, but I don't intend on showing her any of them. She knows just as well to ignore that kind of stuff as much as I do.
With the accidents, do you think there's obviously been one that has possibly had a big impact on mentally, or do you think that they've all been quite something that you've been able to use to either your advantage?
Definitely, I don't think I've had any that have been advantageous necessarily. I had one last year. The car broke. I had a hub failure, I think it was, at Thruxton, and I ended up rolling a couple of times, and that definitely knocked my confidence a lot because when that happened, all of a sudden, this idea that's never existed in your head, which is the car going to break under me? You know, and never once have I thought that in my life where I'm like going into a corner and I'm like, what if the car breaks? All of a sudden that idea suddenly exists, and that's taken quite a lot for me to bounce back from, at least up until now. So it's been quite a journey from that point. But again, as a driver, you have to be resilient in that aspect and work your way around it in whatever way possible.
In those moments, is it like very quick, like milliseconds, it just happens, or is it almost like slow and you have time to think, like you just said about you don't think it's gonna happen and now the scenario's there? Does time almost slow down slightly?
Um, I can't. I don't really know. uh, when it happened, there were certain parts of it that were pretty slow. Um, Obviously, your mind and your thoughts move very fast, right? And so there were moments during the wreck I remember thinking, but I remember like thinking in full sentences, but it was only for like a split second. So there's that kind of stuff. But I don't think ever at any point it like slowed down. It was just you know the wheel fell off. I go, oh, that's not good, and then all of a sudden I'm upside down into a fence. I'm like, it kind of moved faster than I would have expected, but it moved about how I would have expected at the same time.
Would you say that the favourite track you've raced at is in the UK? Would you say it was in the US? What would you say your favourite track is?
Um, I really like Alton Park, um, but I think right now my favorite track is still in the US. I haven't gotten the track yet that I like love for sure in the UK that I don't have it in the US, and that track is Mid Ohio. But yeah.
What type of tracks so obviously you see everywhere you go, like I'd say the UK obviously with your Brands Hatch, your Alton Park, they're all obviously different but they're all similar in their own like ways, whereas in the US are the tracks like completely different at the circuits, like do they have similarities?
Yeah, a lot of the tracks have very specific characteristics. There are more 90-degree corners in the U.S., like very heavy braking zones. The ones that come to mind are like Road America. Mid-Ohio has a couple of big heavy braking zones as well. Indianapolis is another one, the Roval. And then obviously, because there's so many different types of land in the U.S., like out west you get a lot more hilly stuff like Laguna Seca or Thunder Hill. But at the end of the day, they still do have some U.S. characteristics. One of the things about U.S. tracks is they are like they're a little bit dangerous. The like Road America, for example, there's just walls either side of you the entire way around, and it's cool. It's a lot of fun, but it also produces some pretty big wrecks. Same with Mid Ohio. But yeah, I think there's definitely a lot of similar characteristics when it comes to U.S. tracks. Yeah.
Would you say there's a specific skill or life skill that racing's taught you outside the tracks, or something obviously that you've possibly learned through racing that you've been able to apply just in general day-to-day life?
I think in general, my ability to talk to people and just introduce myself, cold cold calling, or just like I said, just introducing myself to people, it definitely wouldn't be as developed as it is now if it weren't for racing. The public speaking aspects, the professionalism that you develop as a very young person, right? At 18, I moved to the UK and had to introduce myself to a bunch of new people that owned race teams and things like that. And all of that kind of compounds that into skills that you wouldn't develop on your own or in any other situation, I wouldn't imagine. That's probably the biggest one. There's obviously, from a learning perspective, in specific situations, as a driver, you find ways to overcome obstacles, whether they're on track, off track, um, and those are great life skills to have. And then for myself, living on my own at a young enough age, living in a new country at a young age, it's a lot of just actual life skills of learning how to live by myself and learning how to act as an adult by myself in a completely new country. So there's definitely a ton of stuff that racing has taught me that I wouldn't know without it.
Would you say, obviously, media can be, some people probably enjoy it, some people despise it. Would you say it's one of them that it's part of what you have to do, or is it something that sometimes you might really enjoy and other days you just obviously want to go racing?
Part of it's definitely up to the enjoyment and things like that. I think a lot of it has to do with why people race, and everyone's got their own reasons. Some people like the fame, some people just want to drive a car. So that kind of stuff, it varies from person to person. It varies with me day to day. It just kind of depends on how I'm feeling. If I feel like talking to media or anything like that. If I have a good race, yeah, I'll talk to the media. If I don't, then I want to go home.
Yeah. Would you say that obviously racing in GB4 and it being, would you say obviously the highest level of racing you've done so far to date, or
Yeah,
would you say
yeah.
that that's come with like a lot more fans? Do people like, you know, obviously with watching GB4, I'd assume that it could be anyone from people that love F1 to people that are very dedicated to GB4. Do you think that's something that you've been able to like get through moving to the UK? A lot of like fans in GB4.
Yeah, I think I definitely noticed, at least on like the social media metrics and things like that, the numbers have gone up. So there's no doubt that in my mind that that media coverage and just existing in GB4 has done a lot for me publicly. The more, like, the higher you go up, the cooler the cars look, this and that, the more fans you're going to have, and the more interest there's going to be for racing drivers. So, yeah, I think I think like the publicity and the popularity of GB4 has done a lot for my personal growth as like a public figure, I guess.
Would you say you're surprised by it being in GB4, or is it something that you just expected?
Yeah, I think looking on GB4 and seeing the quality of the championship and how well they run it, I kind of knew that it was going to happen, and I think they've certainly met or exceeded my expectations. Like I think the quality of the live streams, the quality of the public interaction, and the quality of the championship this year is so much higher than what it was before. So I think it's caught a lot of people by surprise. But now we're in that phase of now we know what the expectations are, and they've done an amazing job with just meeting those, like matching that to that quality.
So one thing I do really want to ask is what is like a day to day life of a GB4 driver, well, just racing driver in general. What is it like? Is it very busy? Is some days quite relaxed? How would you?
Yeah, it definitely varies from day to day. Like today for me has been it's been such an embarrassingly like lazy day. I haven't done a thing. I mean, most days you'll spend a couple hours at the gym, physically training and things like that. I do my own meal work and like meal prepping and things like that. Going over video and stuff, just passively always thinking about racing has been one of my biggest things. And just kind of as a driver, keeping yourself, you know, sane, I guess is an interesting way to describe it. But you have to allot yourself time because uh, the driver's mind is a very important thing, and so you need to be able to kind of control that. But like I said, some days it's super busy. I'll have meetings at the team workshop, or I'll be writing emails or updating my website and things like that. And other days, yeah, it's just absolutely nothing. This happens to be one of those.
Do you think that's something that's quite important then, in terms of, you talked about obviously keeping like sane? Would you say it's quite hard to, obviously some people, if you're in like the average job, for example, whatever you're doing at work, if you came home and was constantly thinking about that, it'd be quite hard to shut off. Is it similar for obviously racing drivers? If you're obviously obsessing over it and trying to get better every single like hour of the day, is it quite hard to shut off sometimes, do you think, or is it quite easy for you?
I think it is definitely, especially when it's someone like me who's over here for the sole purpose of racing, right? I mean, that's all you can think about. Some days, that's all you feel like you're allowed to think about, and that's the biggest thing. Is just kind of it is learning how to shut that off and learning how to do other things. So that's why I do try to visit other parts of the country and just enjoy life in the UK as much as I do try to focus on racing.
Do you find it was something that obviously came quite like quickly after you moved to the UK? It was a lot easier in terms of after having a first few races, having like going in the gym after doing it for a bit, being able to, right, this is my time to shut off. This is it.
Yeah, definitely. You kind of pick up new things to do. Just not being in a place that's familiar, there's always something to learn, always something to experience, right? I definitely remember the first, like when I came here for the first like half of the season, it was just nonstop, just complete thoughts about racing. It was just eating up all the time in my day. But after a little while, I started to sort of settle down and try to focus on other things because I knew it was, in a sense, it was hurting my racing a little bit to be obsessing over it too much.
And then at the moment, what do you think? Obviously, you've got the rest of the GB4 season to go. What would you say is the next steps? Is it meant having quite a few seasons in GB4? Do you think you could, if, say for example, the next 5 years, what in your head do you think is the almost like the path? I know that's quite far, that can be quite far away, but what do you think in your head is like the path?
No, that's fair. I think I'd love to move out of GB4 next year. I don't think staying here is really an option. It's a great series, obviously, but it being the bottom rung of the Formula One ladder, you don't want to stay in a series like that very long. So the hope for next year is to race in GB3, and then from there move on the Formula Car ladder as much as possible. Obviously we keep our options open. That's what I've always done, and that's how I've gotten this far. And so wherever that ends up taking me, it could be a completely different path. It could be down endurance racing or something like that. But no, it just all comes down to where the right option is.
Yeah, I'm going to just touch on that. Is you see some people that just want to do obviously single seater racing, and if they eventually get to where they can and can't go any further, they might either just maintain that or stop. Are you? Is that obviously for most people the end goal is F1? It makes sense, but for you, obviously, with F1 in mind, do you obviously, like you said, are you open to, for example, other types of racing, or is it single seaters which you really want to focus on?
I'm definitely open to other stuff. It's been one of my biggest dreams in racing is actually to win the 24 Hours of Le Mans. Like that supersedes winning a Formula One race to me. Um, Granted, depends on the situation. I'm sure I'd be pretty happy to win a Formula One race, but yeah, I would like. There's definitely forms of racing that I'm like hands off. No, absolutely not. But then there's like I'm absolutely open to endurance racing. I love it. I watch all the races and I love following that kind of stuff, and I would love to race in that as well. So yeah, I'm totally open to that switch.
Would you say that's something obviously different about your endurance racing? It's obviously a team plays a huge part in all forms of racing, from engineers to strategists to everyone. But in endurance racing, obviously, I mean, there's driver swaps, all that stuff. Would you say that's something that excites you more than obviously that, or excite you just as much as any other team?
I think endurance racing to me is it's just very I'm not sure I can find the right word for it, but it's just very appealing in the sense of just the long races, the grueling hours. It just makes it that much more worth it at the end of the race, right? It makes it that much more exciting. It makes it that much more intense. And I like that aspect of endurance racing and just racing in general. I think the mixed class aspect of it is a lot of fun. I've done mixed class racing in my life, mixed class Formula Car racing, and that's very interesting as well. And I've always found that doing that kind of mixed class racing has always been super fun to me. So I do enjoy that.
Have you ever done any sort of like maybe not obviously you've got 12 hours, 24, but like a long like I know you see people do from karting 4 to 24 hour races. Have you ever done a sort of endurance race?
I think the longest endurance race I was supposed to do. I think I was supposed to do a 12-hour race at one point, and that didn't end up working out. But other than that, I haven't actually done too much endurance racing. Although I'm told I would be good at it because I'm pretty consistent with my lap times and such. I remember last year I would be able to hit marks within half a tenth of each other for like 5 consecutive laps, and that's a very good and that's a very appealing aspect in endurance racing. So I'd love to see what I can do in that kind of category.
Yeah, it's something I went to there's like a charity karting event. It was indoor karting, but a charity event. They did a 4 hour one, a 12 hour, and there was meant to be a 24, but I think you needed 10 people at least in
Whoa,
a team.
that's crazy.
Um, and a lot of people, obviously, the dates got changed and they couldn't do it. But I'd love to have seen how that played out. People were bringing like motorhomes to the car park of this indoor karting track just to
Uh-huh.
obviously sleep, and some people take it more seriously than others. But would you say then endurance racing? Do you think they're all hard in their own ways, like different ways? Do you think one's specifically harder than another type of racing? What would you say?
I think maybe a bit of a sensitive subject right now because obviously, if you've been following endurance racing, there's been some BOP talks. But I do think they're just as hard equally. In their own ways. You can't really compare either. It's the same as comparing like IndyCar to Formula One or something like that. It's completely, almost to an extent, completely different disciplines. You look at the driving style of each of those cars, and it's just different, right? You can't drive a Formula One car for 24 hours, and so it's kind of hard to compare them. But they're difficult in their own ways, definitely.
What's your thoughts on this? Doesn't have to be from it can be a watching perspective or driving perspective. What's your thoughts on rally driving?
Oh, I love it.
Yeah,
It's one of those things that I've wanted to do for the longest time. Um, I've just never found myself in a position. In the U.S., I live in Illinois, which is known for boring roads and flat. It's just a flat state. And so there's just no opportunity to do any sort of rally style driving there. I'd love to give it a try in England. You've got some great roads for it, so there's that. But maybe someday.
but I think that'll be it. Thank you for coming on. First podcast, first guest.
Awesome.
So yeah, I really appreciate it. Thank you
Yeah,
very
of
much.
course. I'm happy to be the first guest. Great job. So I'm looking forward to seeing how it all turns out.